Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Blame It on Marketing with Emma and Ruta. This is a family episode. It's not that because we're related, but because Joe, Kylie, Ruta, and I, we all kind of work together and have worked together. So it's a kind of keeping it in the family type episode this week, which we're really excited about. We're going to be talking about all things campaigns and campaign marketing, and that's why we've kind of got Kylie and Joe with us today. I think it's also worth mentioning, and we haven't mentioned this before, but we all are different houses from the Harry Potter. They're different houses, right? There's no other way of saying that. And so, what we would like you to do is, as you listen to this episode, try and figure out who is in which house because we each represent one. So, best of luck. Yeah, we're going to reveal them at the end. So, without further ado, Kylie and Joe, over to you to introduce yourself. Kylie, why don't you go first?
Okay. Hi. Thanks, everyone. So my name is Kylie. I have worked in professional services marketing for about 10 years now, predominantly within HR tech. And yeah, I've done a lot of campaigns in my time, and I'm really excited to talk to you all about them.
Hello, I'm Joe. I am now completely dedicate my time to content. I've worked in professional services, management consultancy, workplace technology for a long time, in generalist marketing roles, head of marketing roles, and at some point decided that content was the way forward. Now working with the Advocitude crowd and others on creating good content.
Amazing. So, why don't we start with the basics? Because much like words like strategy and go to market and campaigns, I feel like we say them, but we don't really know what we mean by them sometimes anymore, or at least other people sometimes don't. So, what do we mean when we say a campaign? And why do so many marketers, at least in our experience, kind of not bother with them?
So for me, when you say campaign or when I think about planning a campaign, it's how can we tie together loads of different pieces of activity under one theme or like one umbrella topic. And so that might be webinars, it might be in-person events, even down to like LinkedIn advertising, newsletters, email comms, all of that kind of stuff that we do day in, day out. But it's actually aligning it around a common thought, with clear calls to action that then can be passed to the sales team or whoever to look at, nurture, and then from there, hopefully sell some stuff, which I think is what we're all here for.
Yeah, I'm shocked that people avoid them. I love a marketing campaign. In fact, I think it's the foundation of a lot of the content that I produce. I think they can be really difficult to pull together because you need a really strong, clear message. So if you haven't done all the groundwork in advance about what are your differentiators, what's the difference that you're marketing and who are you marketing it to, you can't come up with a strong campaign. And I'm thinking about content-led campaigns here, not brand campaigns. um, I think that probably puts some people off. I think you also really need to keep the pace. So you need to be really well planned. You need to have it mapped out, a time scale that you can commit to, and have everything ready to go. Because although we might feel when we're running a campaign, and we're doing a couple at the moment, for us, the pace feels quite difficult. It's really fast and you have to get things out in a really timely way. But to all of the people you're trying to reach, they're not feeling that intensity of it. So I think having the planning and the resources and the speed of implementation probably puts some people off as well. I think as well, some people might be put off by a lack of buy-in from sales. I think sometimes sales think if this is not specifically a lead generation thing, we don't want to put a lot of our time and resources to it. So if it's a, you know, something that's slightly more demand gen or awareness, there might not be as much love for it as things that are going to get specific MQLs through the door.
I think there's there's something about a campaign as well where it really feels like you're tying your colours to the mast in terms of your skills and as a marketer in terms of how well you can plan and deliver a campaign, but also as a company that's what you're putting out there. That's like your manifesto, that's your thing that people will be talking about, hopefully. And so there can sometimes be a bit of, oh, I'm not sure, maybe we need to review, and that allows the timescales to slip and means that things don't go out. Ultimately, though, the only person that's harming is you, because it's you're missing out on that opportunity to get that piece out the door. But I think, yeah, sometimes it can feel a bit of that pressure of, oh, we haven't done anything for ages, so when we do something, it needs to be really good, rather than just, I know this is Emma's philosophy, get it out. Just get it out, get it gone.
I was going to say, one of the things that I think does put, and it's not necessarily just marketers off, but I think one of the things that puts senior leadership off the idea of marketing doing campaigns is the time it takes to produce the content, is that planning phase, because there's this perception, I think, and it is, obviously, we know it's an incorrect perception. I'm looking straight down the lens of the camera now, like I'm talking to you, SLT, that think this shit, that because we are just doing campaigns and we're taking time to produce content, that we're then either not doing anything else, which is completely wrong, because, you know, there's all this day-to-day stuff that marketing do that people don't see, and that also by taking our time and planning things out and actually like getting the production of the content right, that therefore when it happens it should be this big magical thing that fixes all of our problems. So I think there's just this like weird, I think, again, this is probably on marketers, we do need to be better at communicating like what the purpose of the campaign is, what do we expect metrics wise, all of those sorts of things. But do you guys think that, because I've certainly felt that with SLT members before, that they're like, well, why are you spending ages on this campaign when you should be just doing all this other stuff? And it's like, oh, it's because you don't understand the impact that a campaign has.
Or you'll say like you're doing a campaign and then a week later they're like, oh, what are you up to? And you're like, still doing the campaign. Like, you know, you might have even produced the content, but like we now have to make more content, or we have to like check which bits of the funnel it's getting stuck in and find solutions for that. So, you know, like we're still doing the campaign. Yeah, I agree. But I also think one of the ways that I visualize campaigns in my head is I usually work on a quarterly basis, but you can do this on any basis. So you spend the first month, let's say, creating all the content, and then you spend 2 months promoting it. But because the content's already ready, it means that basically in the third month of that quarter, you are producing the next quarter's content. So once you get into the flow and you find a good rhythm, whether it's a 4-week basis, whatever rhythm that is, it actually doesn't look like there's any gaps and nothing is happening. And maybe that's a way to visualize it, because yeah, the first time you do it, it feels like everything stopped and now they're just prepping this campaign stuff. But once you get into the rhythm and you keep doing them, it's actually a way to put out huge amounts of content, and huge amounts of I guess just big amounts of content regularly.
Yeah, I agree. And I remember the first time digital campaign specifically was explained to me. I was working with a freelance digital consultant. She taught me the term SEO, which blew my mind. It was a long time ago though, so don't panic. It wasn't like last week. She was saying
Last
when you're
week.
running it's so nice to meet her though. When you're running a digital campaign, you want a month to plan it, you want a month to run it, and then as on that third month, you're doing your review of how it went and you're prepping your next one. And when I actually stopped to think about that, I was like, oh yes, no, that's right. You don't completely finish one set of activity and then sit down with a blank piece of paper and go, what are we gonna do? You know, it's having that rolling. Yeah, absolutely.
I think the most important thing is the key idea. And I think this is something you need to get buy-in on early, because it's very different to product marketing. The idea for the campaign is not going to be, we're going to push the thing that we sell. It's probably, in our industry that I work in anyway, it's probably going to be issues led or aspiration led, based on your knowledge of the target audience. So it has to have the big idea that speaks to your audience. It's probably going to be the thing that you hook the campaign on is probably going to be bigger than the thing that you sell. And I think that's the most important thing to get right, and putting all that into some kind of high value piece of content. You'll have your central piece of content, which might be a webinar series, it might be a report, a white paper, a video. You have your high value piece of content, and then everything else flows from that, links into that, and links back to it. Things that get missed, but don't with us, because we have Emma, is measuring it and deciding from the very beginning what you're going to measure, not just doing it all and then at the end thinking, right, well, what did we get out of it? But at the very beginning, tying it back to your strategy and to the business plan, so you can feed back information from the current campaign that you're running to improve the subsequent ones.
And it gives you a benchmark as well, right, of this is what we think we should get out of this campaign. So if you're not, you can very quickly, week by week review, okay, things aren't going as well as they should be. Maybe we need something here, or there's something missing there. Because also, I think one of the things that are not missed, but overlooked in campaigns is that they can feel quite static. Like, you've planned all this stuff out, you do the stuff, that's it. But I much prefer having campaigns where you plan a bunch of stuff out, you do it, you see what works, you do a bit more of that, and then you get to your goal in that kind of like iterative cycle, and then you move on to the next campaign once you're happy.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would really add to that is actually, and it sounds really basic, but the amount of times that it kind of gets overlooked, is having a really clear idea of who it is that you're actually marketing to. Knowing who your ICP is. So who are your ideal customers? The amount of times that I've come across companies where they've won the business, and then it's just it's just a disaster from start to finish, because the client and the company have very different ideas of what each other does and how they will work together. There's a disconnect from the start. It then obviously churns and everyone's really cross with each other. Whereas if you have a really clear idea of who that person is, who your persona is, who do you want to target, you then target them, win the business, and then everyone's happy. I mean, that's obviously a very simplified version of how it works, but that's how you get your advocates. That's how you then have a regular stream of income, rather than trying to hook, I don't know, like maybe an enterprise deal when you're not set up for something like that. Everyone's going to end up annoyed, so I think that for me is really key. Once you know who you're targeting, you can talk to them in their language, and you can start to create your content in a way that will help them.
The house of Advocitude is aligned. I can feel it. I can hear it.
Forget the Harry Potter houses. Welcome to the House of Advocitude, everyone. The other thing I think that gets missed, and it is something that all of us, like, if when you talk about campaign or content horror stories, and I'm going to trigger everyone by saying this, is when people railroad your content because it's not been signed off. And all of us are going, oh my God, I can think of so many examples where that's happened. But it is it's such a classic thing that happens that you forget about, because, like, Joe, I agree with you. Like, there's the big stuff, like, how does this fulfill your strategy? How is this actually going to deliver some of your, like, targets? But also, yeah, just really basic stuff, like, have you briefed people properly? Have you got the timelines in place? Like, all those sorts of things. Like, because I think we've said it on other episodes, haven't we? Like, as marketers, we've all got this sort of like weird, naive optimism where we're like, oh, everything's going to be fine. We'll get it out the door. We'll be fine. And then assholes like me come along and go, just get it out the door. And then actually the reality is some CEO somewhere goes, what is this thing? And then completely railroads the project. So definitely
the goal is to get it out before they see it. And then once it's out, you're like, oh, people are loving it. It's all good. I don't do that ever. Yeah, it's so true. Getting the stakeholder management right from the beginning is key, because backing on to Kylie's point of just knowing who you're selling to, often when the stakeholder is reviewing the content, they're reviewing it as themselves, as the owner, as the senior management, and they're not reviewing it as the buyer persona. So getting really clear from the beginning on the buyer personas, on like what language they like to use, or like how familiar they are with this topic, so we know like kind of where to hit them, is so key. And having them understand that and sign off to that, so then when it comes to final content approval, which I hope that you don't have to do and you can just put it out. But if you do have to do it, you've got that basis of like, hey, we agreed on these things and this is what the buyer persona requires. I get that you're an expert in this and this seems a bit simple to you, or whatever the issue is, but you can kind of walk them through that process again, because doing it right at the end is so hard, and like it crushes everyone's soul.
Yeah, agreed. There's an example that I always think about when I first moved into like the HR space. I used to work at a company that sold psychometric assessments, and we sold training courses. I was the training admin person, and because we were selling it from the BPS, we used to call it like test user occupational psychology verbal whatever, and we would call it that really long title on the website. The people that are taking the course don't know that that's what it's called. They're looking for level A, level B. There's a massive disconnect. You're never going to find those people because we're not speaking their language. And I think that's always something I try to consider, just because the people that I work with are potentially thought leaders in their space, or they know the best practice ways to be doing things. That doesn't mean that their end users are actually there. They might be very much scratching around thinking, I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a time and a place for that, right? Like you can show off your expertise, but you don't need to do it with everything. And also you don't need to maybe go into that kind of level of detail or language, make it make sense to the people that are supposed to be reading it, basically.
The only time you do that is if your audience are actual academics, and in which case if you don't call it something long ass fancy title, they don't understand. So it's again, know your audience.
Definitely get that proofread. Don't do a Ruta and just put stuff out if you're talking to academics, because it's going to be awkward for you. So we've spoken a little bit about kind of what campaigns are, right, and how we structure them, but let's circle back to what's the point of doing them. So what are some of the benefits of actually running campaigns and doing them well, because we're going to ditch the other side of things of where it doesn't go well, because it probably was a waste of time.
Yeah, I think the benefits of doing a campaign, obviously it means that you're going out to the market with a consistent message. Not that I imagine that your targets, your prospects are sitting on LinkedIn thinking, oh, when are they going to post again? I just can't wait. But just making sure that for the period of that campaign, everyone is on message, and it's coming from your corporate LinkedIn, it's coming out from the salespeople, it's coming out from anyone that you can get to post it, and everybody's on the same page. I think that's a really powerful message. I've previously worked at a very large consultancy business where there was like shared LinkedIn profiles, and you could be posting about 7 or 8 different topics any given day, and it must have just felt like the company had multiple personalities. There was no structure, you never knew what was going to be coming out next. So I think that's really beneficial, and it also gives people an opportunity to, if you're doing a campaign, it has the opportunity for them to become aware of your brand, know what it is that you stand for, what it is that you can offer for them, and to give them the information that they're going to need to speak to their stakeholders to be able to make a buying decision. They might not be in a position to do so right away, but it could be the fact that they download a white paper, they think, oh, this is really interesting, and in a year's time when they're renewing a subscription or something, they're able to go, actually, I remember that company. They had this really interesting piece of thought leadership, and I can now go back and contact them because I know that they know where I'm struggling.
I hope our clients think that, Kylie, that they remember our white papers for an entire year. And how good they were.
I am trying to forget some of them. 18 random amends, I'm trying to block them out.
I agree with everything Kylie said. I also think it allows companies and people within the companies to demonstrate their credibility and their expertise in a helpful way that, again, connects with people so that they will come back to them when they do need some kind of service in the space that we're talking about. Agree on consistency as well. It brings a focus for everybody to have a common voice around a topic. And I think that it's a way of directly speaking to your audience in a way that adds value, and we know that's when people buy, especially in business to business, isn't it? It's the people that add value the most and add value the first, that are remembered and are top of mind when people come to buy.
I was just going to say, I think it's that, to add to what to add to what both of you are saying, I think it's, if you're running campaigns in that structure where we say that there isn't really a gap between campaigns, there might feel like there is, but there isn't. That's the way that you nail demand generation, right? Isn't it? It's like there's that cadence of content coming out that gives you the ability to create demand for what you're doing. So it's like, you know, especially the way that people buy now, you've got to kind of be in their face all the time. So it's like, yes, they downloaded your ebook, that was wonderful, but next week they're listening to your podcast, and the week after that they're looking at your LinkedIn ad, and then blah, 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 blah. And I'm actually seeing firsthand with a client of ours, I think I can say that is starting to work, because yes, the attribution of where people are coming from has now become really messy, because everyone's like, oh, I saw you on LinkedIn, I saw you were there, I saw you there. And I'm like, bitch, that's because the campaigns are working. So everyone else is like, oh, all of a sudden I haven't got this like really clear attribution, but that's for me, that's perfect, because that shows to me that that's actual demand gen, right? That's us doing our job properly. So I think it's the impact on the actual performance of your marketing. If you do actually do things in that way and you kind of build your team around that, you're going to get more bang for your buck. You know, you're not going to have to spend as much on content creation. You're going to see like messy attribution, but we love it. We're here for it in 2024. And yeah, so, and I think it's a good thing. Like you say, it's useful for your audience. If you're creating useful content, people will remember you for being the one that actually helped them out, rather than like just gave them some pointless crap that they'll never remember. So yeah, I think all of that.
I think also from a like trying to manage a team and align people, and from a very selfish point, it just simplifies things. Like, I don't want to be dealing with 4 channels with 12 different bits of content going out about 5 different topics, and then having to worry about what bits of the funnel they're in and how we're going to funnel these through to like nurture, and finding the right nurture for them, and having something generic or having something. It just gets rid of all of those worries and makes it very simple. We're talking about this to these people, and you know, we need to hit them in all the areas of the funnel, but we're always kind of circling back to the same thing. I find that much easier to deal with than the opposite of just things are happening and you got to kind of make it make sense, because my brain just doesn't work like that at all.
Yeah, and I think that works really well when you're managing your internal stakeholders as well, because the amount of times people come to you and go, I've got this really great idea, I think we should make some flyers. And you're like, okay, great. Where, why, what for? And actually, if you can say, that's a really nice idea, but we're actually working on this campaign at the moment, we'll see how we can slot it into something in the future. It allows you to maintain that focus on what you're trying to achieve, and not just creating content for content's sake. I think we can probably all we all know of situations where, I know I've definitely done it, I've briefed a copywriter on 3 completely separate topics because I've paid for copywriter time, I don't really have a plan, but let's just write some stuff. Whereas if you've got a campaign plan, it's consistent. I'm really sorry, Joe, for doing that to you, by the way.
I think there have been more than 3.
I think we all know that we're talking about me and Joe.
It's hard for us though when you have a client who isn't bought into doing campaigns, but they're bought into working with us. Admittedly, in a previous iteration, a previous form of not Advocitude. But if they're committed to working with us, but they're not committed to doing campaigns, you end up producing really obscure, really scattergun pieces of content. You know, the CEO wants to write about this. We've done an event about this. You know, one of our partners is an expert in this. And to them, it feels great because they're the subject matter experts and they love what they do. But to the external market, it just looks really random. And because of that, it's a lot less memorable.
It's like the worst version of spray. We talk about spray and pray, don't we? We're like, oh, just put some shit out and hope for the best, and like whatever, because it placates your senior leadership team, right? That's the reason why it happens. You're like, oh, I'm just trying to keep them really happy, so we'll just put out whatever the hell they want, and they can write it however they want. That's and I get it. We get marketers who are in that position. We're not trying to say otherwise, but it is just then nothing that you do will work, and then you will be blamed when things are not performing as they should be. Yeah. So, not to be too negative, so if you want to give one a go, if you haven't got into this rhythm of doing campaigns, what are some of the things that people should do if they want to take those next steps? Obviously they can hire the Advocitude team if they want to give it a go, but you can edit that out, Ruta, if you want. But other than that, what else should they do if they want to give running a campaign?
I find it very useful to use Kylie's spreadsheet, which has a quarterly plan. It's a plan of a year with the year divided into quarters, all the different channels you might use, all the different media you might use. And if you start with that as a structured approach, I think that's really useful for you as a marketer, because that's quite a internally focused thing or a self-focused thing. Aside from that, I think get the people on board that you need to get on board with it, however you have to describe it to them. If you don't think they're going to be open to, let's run a marketing campaign, think about how you can talk about bringing focus, like a quarterly focus to your marketing, or cultivating some subject matter experts on different topics within the organization. Just position it however you need to position it to make sure that people are on board with it, or else it's going to get undermined pretty quickly and you'll fall into all of those traps that we've covered already. But yeah, I think planning, scheduling, resourcing it correctly is what will set you up for success. And obviously, and having the idea, having an internal discussion, or having subject matter experts on board with what your overall key messages are going to be for your campaigns, either for the first one or for the entire year. Have your 4 messages that you're going to hook everything off.
Yeah, agreed. So as Joe was saying, I have a trademarked spreadsheet, which is basically just the quarters of the year. As Joe was saying, it breaks it out into the different channels. Quite often when I speak to people, they'll say things like, we don't really know what to talk about. Like, we know that we need to post on social media, but I don't really know where to start. And for me, I always think social media is like the last thing. It's not the first thing, it's the last thing. So you get your theme, and that's exactly how this spreadsheet is structured. You have your theme, all of your different events and stuff like that, and then the social media, Joe will disagree with me here because she's doing a lot of it at the moment, the social media will write itself because you've got all of this lovely activity that you've got to talk about. And that's basically what you're doing on social media, isn't it? You're explaining what you're doing, you're talking about events you've gone to and stuff like that. Whereas I think if you're trying to reverse engineer it, it becomes really difficult. You're scratching around thinking, is this a thing? Can we talk about this? And it can be a lot more challenging. So yeah, I really recommend, as Joe was saying, you start off with your year, you plot all of the things that are important, and that can either be like events that you want to go to, or even global days, things like Earth Day, specific conferences or whatever, and then you go from there.
That's a really great point about social media being the last bit rather than the first bit, because you're so right. Trying to just come up with stuff to say on social and making it like sound good is actually quite hard. Whilst if you start with a hero piece of content, and it doesn't have to be huge, it could be like a little video, like an interview video, or it could be a long blog or something like that, and you anchor everything back to that, and it's like, okay, how do I get people back to this blog, or how do I dissect this blog in 10 different ways? Your social media will write itself. It's not gonna write itself, but you will know what you want to talk about. Yeah.
But you've got
I'm in the minority now.
But you know what you're going to be talking about, right? Like it makes it much easier than doing it the other way around, for sure.
Yeah, it goes back to like, what is the purpose of the content or the campaign you're trying to run? Like, it's all right if your campaign is actually an awareness campaign, And so therefore all you're actually trying to do is drive traffic to the website, increase followers on social, then that's fine if that's the intention. If it's got some, if it's, you know, if you need it to have that more sort of like revenue pipeline focus, then it's about conversion. So it's like, how am I, whatever I do from a campaign perspective, how am I going to get people to convert off the back of this campaign? And if you have that one sort of like singular laser focus on it, then you're right, everything else you do should be fine. I say should be fine. having lived through some campaign trauma, but it does, it does help people if you've got that like laser focus on like, this has got one purpose and it's to do this thing, and that's cool. I don't know if you guys find that works.
It does. And then it stops people being disappointed as well if you run a campaign and they are, you know, concerned about the number of conversions. But if you stated from the very beginning what the specific job of that campaign is, and it's not converting, then it's setting expectations about what the campaign
and it's also important to think through that workflow, right? So you might have a great theme or a content idea, but you might need to get people to convert, let's say, all the way to a demo. Okay, so what are the stages we're going to have to get them through to get them there, and then what content is going to get them there, or like what different actions are going to get them there? Because you don't want to be like, you know, several weeks into creating your content and then you're like, whoa, like how are we even going to get them onto the website, you know, or like something like that. It's good to kind of pre-think that path, and then that way no one takes the path. I will admit to that, but at least they've got a way to do it and get to the end.
That's it, you've got a hypothesis then, haven't you? Yeah.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I think it's really important to make sure that sales are involved in it from really early on. Like especially when I first started in marketing, which was I think 1904, something like that. It's a really long time ago, where you would do a webinar and everyone would like, I need the list, and you download it, send it around, and they would just call people and be like, oh yeah, do you want it? And it's like, what? No, you can't. That's not what we're doing.
No, you mad bastards.
You have to take a step back and think, if I registered for a webinar, am I ready to buy a £100,000 product? Probably not. So you need to work with the sales team. I am a hot lead. I think you need to work with the sales team just to work out what does it mean when we get these conversions and these leads and these names? What are we going to be doing with them afterwards? And why you must not just call them. That is not what you're doing. I think that's very important.
Or, you know, call them and have a conversation about the thing they watched or whatever it was. Not, hey, are you going to buy this thing now?
Are you buying it or not?
I wish it worked like that. I really do. Yeah, I really wish it worked that way, but it doesn't.
I know.
Right, ladies, shall we wrap up by revealing our Hogwarts houses? I'll go first because I think mine's fairly guessable. I'm a Ravenclaw.
I'm a Gryffindor.
I'm a Hufflepuff, but I feel I have rising Slytherin energy.
She definitely does.
And the Slytherin in the house with the white hair.
I mean, I think that was pretty obvious, wasn't it?
I never thought it was. When you told me, I was like, what? Like, are you sure? I don't know. I just don't see it.
I could have guessed all three of you.
Kylie and Joe are like, oh, we know. We've seen it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe because I enjoy you being... I enjoy how you are a Slytherin, I think. That's why I don't see it. I'm like, no, it's fine. It's all good.
We had a really long conversation the other day where Emma tried to justify the fact that like being ambitious or, you know, the traits of being a Slytherin are actually fine. It's just that there's a couple of bad eggs. I was like, oh, right, okay.
Most of the eggs, but you know.
I read it. There's just a couple of rogue ones, but otherwise you can turn the Slytherin tendencies to a positive. There's no right or wrong, like all good psychometric profiling tests.
Exactly. Look at Snape.
Emma, can you tell the story for the fans about what happened the other day when you were out and about?
I was in Waitrose, which is where I spend apparently a lot of my time. And I was wearing my Slytherin scarf, and a child pointed at me and said to their mother, there's a Slytherin. Or that's a Slytherin.
I love that.
And
It's
I
so
laughed
good.
really, really hard. And I think the mother was horrified. But I enjoyed it. I was like, that's right. Just be aware.
So I'm going to say thank you to everyone. Thank you for this enlightening episode about campaigns and Harry Potter. And we will see you in the next one.